quiet night in a small town suddenly became the starting point of a case that no one could have predicted. At first, it seemed like any other crime, something that might briefly catch attention and then fade away. But the truth was far more complex. A simple investigation soon grew into a web of lies, betrayals, and shocking discoveries that forced people to question everything they thought they knew. This story was not just about a victim or a suspect. It was about how darkness can hide in the most unexpected places. The beginning was almost ordinary, and that is what made it even more terrifying. A missing person report was filed after a loved one never returned home. Friends and family were worried, but police treated it as a routine case at first. After all, adults sometimes vanish on their own, they said. But this time, the feeling in the air was different. The family insisted something was terribly wrong. It began slowly. Police officers traced the last known movements, checked phone records, and spoke to witnesses. But every answer raised more questions. The missing person had left behind personal belongings, things no one would ever leave voluntarily. Their car was parked in an odd location, not far from home, but in a place that did not make sense. To the officers, it suggested an abrupt stop, as if someone had forced them out or tricked them into leaving. This detail unsettled investigators. Suddenly, it was not a voluntary disappearance. It was something else, something sinister. As the days went on, tension spread across the community. People feared the worst. Neighbors who once felt safe began locking doors at all hours, looking over their shoulders. Family members held vigils and begged for answers, while police expanded their search. Slowly, patterns began to form. Surveillance footage showed blurred figures and movements in the night that did not align with official statements. Someone was lying, but who? Detectives interviewed friends, co-workers, and even close family. One by one, cracks in their stories began to appear. Timelines did not match, alibis sounded rehearsed, and nervous body language exposed secrets no one wanted revealed. The turning point came when investigators uncovered a hidden relationship. Behind closed doors, lives were tangled in ways no one had suspected. Betrayal, jealousy, and secret meetings painted a darker picture. Suddenly, motives became clear. This was not a random crime. It was personal. The missing person had unknowingly walked into a storm built by those closest to them. Police now had to tread carefully, because accusing the wrong person could destroy lives. Still, the evidence was mounting. The shocking part was that the prime suspect was someone trusted, someone everyone thought incapable of such an act. Friends described them as calm, kind, and supportive. But hidden beneath that surface was a darker side, one that had been masked for years. Investigators uncovered records, old messages, and hidden notes that revealed anger and resentment boiling over time. This was not sudden. It had been building like a volcano waiting to erupt. The betrayal was so complete that even experienced detectives were shaken. They had seen countless crimes, but rarely one with such an insane twist. And then came the discovery no one expected. When police finally searched deeper, they uncovered a chilling piece of evidence that tied everything together. It was not just about one crime, but a series of lies that stretched back further than anyone realized. The victim had unknowingly been surrounded by danger for months, maybe years. The twist was not just who committed the crime, but how cleverly they had hidden in plain sight, weaving a false life that fooled everyone. This revelation left the town speechless. People could not believe someone they trusted so deeply could commit something so calculated, so heartless. The final moments of the investigation were filled with tension. Detectives cornered the suspect, presenting the evidence piece by piece. At first, they denied everything, clinging to innocence. But as the walls closed in, cracks appeared. Their voice shook, and their face betrayed the fear of truth finally catching up. And then, the confession slipped out, half a whisper, half a cry. The courtroom later would hear it in full, but in that moment, it was enough. Justice had caught its prey. This case became one of the most talked about crimes in recent memory, not because of brutality alone, but because of the insane twist that no one saw coming. The idea that someone so trusted, someone so ordinary on the outside, could hide such darkness shook people to their core. It reminded everyone that evil often wears a mask, and sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones living quietly among us. The case ended, but the scars it left behind still linger. A chilling reminder of how close danger can be, and how betrayal can come from the last place you would expect. The trial that followed turned into a spectacle no one could ignore. Journalists filled the courtroom, sketch artists rushed to capture every detail, and cameras outside captured the faces of family members whose lives had been torn apart. From the very beginning, the tension was heavy. On one side sat the victims' grieving relatives, their eyes burning with pain and betrayal. On the other side sat the accused, calm and collected, as though the gravity of the accusations had not touched them. It was this calmness that disturbed many observers. How could someone who had committed such cruelty look so untouched by guilt? The answer, prosecutors argued, lay in the suspect's personality. They painted a picture of a manipulator, someone who thrived on control and deception. Every day, new pieces of evidence were revealed, and each one shocked the public more. The prosecution introduced text messages that revealed coded language, hidden arrangements, and secret threats. These were not the actions of someone careless. They were the calculated steps of a mind that had thought through every move. Witnesses were called, and some of them had known the accused for years. Their testimonies were devastating. They spoke of sudden mood swings, of moments where the accused revealed a darker side that few believed at the time. Now those memories made sense, and the puzzle pieces fit together. But the defense was not willing to surrender. They attacked every witness, questioned every timeline, and tried to shift suspicion away. They suggested other possible suspects, hinted at conspiracies, and even tried to discredit the victim's character. This infuriated the family, who sat in silence, holding back tears as their loved one's memory was dragged through the mud. For them, the trial was not just about justice, but about dignity. They wanted the world to remember the victim for who they were, not the lies spun in court. Then came the twist within the twist. Halfway through the trial, a new piece of evidence emerged that no one had expected. A hidden storage unit was discovered, registered under a false name but linked directly to the accused. Inside, investigators found objects belonging to the victim, along with chilling notes that outlined plans in disturbing detail. It was like a script, a step-by-step description of what had been done and how the cover-up was meant to unfold. The discovery shook even the defense team, who struggled to spin it in their favor. Suddenly, the calm mask of the accused cracked. For the first time, their composure slipped, and anger flashed across their face in front of the jury. That single moment shifted everything. The media exploded with headlines, calling it one of the most shocking discoveries in modern crime history. Commentators filled television screens, analyzing the psychology of someone who could plan so meticulously yet believe they would never be caught. The community, already shaken, now lived with the realization that this crime had been carefully built, layer by layer, right under their noses. Friends who once trusted the accused now avoided even speaking their name. Families who had shared dinners and celebrations with them could not believe what they were reading in the news. As the trial neared its end, closing arguments delivered the emotional blow everyone expected. The prosecution described the victim's last moments in painful detail, reminding the jury that this was not just a puzzle of evidence but a real human life lost forever. They highlighted the lies, the manipulation, and the cruelty, leaving no room for doubt. The defense fought back, but their words sounded weaker now, almost desperate. The jury could feel the truth, heavy in the air. When the verdict was finally announced, the room went silent. The jury foreperson stood, hands shaking slightly, and read the words everyone had been waiting for. Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, a single sound carrying the weight of months of suffering, fear, and anger. The family broke into tears, holding each other tightly as though the verdict gave them back some measure of peace. The accused sat still, expressionless, their life forever changed in an instant. The sentencing came later, but the damage was already done. A community had lost its sense of safety. A family had lost their loved one, and the world had witnessed a case with a twist so insane it would be remembered for years. The story spread far beyond the town where it began, becoming a cautionary tale about trust, deception, and how darkness can thrive in the shadows of ordinary life. Even after justice was served, the haunting details continued to echo, a chilling reminder that true evil often hides behind the most familiar faces. After the trial ended and the guilty verdict was handed down, many believed the story had finally reached its conclusion. But in reality, the case was far from over. The sentencing phase was just beginning, and what unfolded during those hearings only deepened the shock and disbelief that surrounded this crime. Families of victims are often given a chance to speak in court, and this time was no different. One by one, relatives took the stand and described in heartbreaking detail how their lives had been shattered. Their words filled the room with an emotional weight heavier than any piece of evidence ever could. Mothers spoke of sleepless nights, siblings spoke of memories that would never be made, and friends described the unbearable silence left behind. Some in the jury box wept quietly, and even hardened court staff were visibly shaken. But just when it seemed like the case had revealed all of its secrets, another twist surfaced, one so disturbing that even experienced investigators were caught off guard. As part of the post-trial proceedings, authorities continued to comb through the accused's personal belongings, searching for any financial records or hidden assets that might help the victim's family pursue restitution. What they uncovered was far more chilling. In an old laptop, buried deep within encrypted files, investigators found references to other names, other plans, and even detailed maps. These files suggested that the crime they had just convicted the accused for was not meant to be a single act of violence, but part of something larger and more sinister. The discovery sent shockwaves through law enforcement. Was this person planning more attacks? Were there other victims no one had ever connected? Suddenly, the case that had already shaken the town was thrust back into the headlines. Detectives reopened old cold cases, searching for connections. They reached out to neighboring towns, and even federal authorities became involved. The chilling possibility that this was only the tip of the iceberg gave the story an entirely new level of horror. In the courtroom, the defense attempted to dismiss these new files as fantasy writing or personal notes with no real-world significance. But prosecutors argued the opposite. They believed these notes were blueprints for crimes that were either already committed or carefully planned for the future. This argument intensified the sentencing hearings. The judge, who had already been preparing to hand down a heavy punishment, now had to weigh the possibility that the accused was not just guilty of one crime, but potentially connected to many more. Meanwhile, the public's reaction was one of outrage and fear. Newspapers ran front-page stories with bold headlines calling the accused a hidden predator. Talk shows debated how someone could live a double life so perfectly, fooling everyone around them while harboring such sinister intentions. People who had once shared daily life with the accused, co-workers, neighbors, even distant relatives, struggled with their own sense of guilt, asking themselves how they had never noticed the signs. Communities were shaken not just by the crime itself, but by the idea that evil could exist so close without being seen. When the sentencing day finally arrived, the courtroom was overflowing. The judge delivered a long, powerful statement before announcing the punishment. He spoke of the calculated cruelty, the betrayal of trust, and the devastating ripple effect on the community. He said the evidence revealed a mind so dangerous that society could never risk giving this individual freedom again. Then, with a firm voice, he sentenced the accused to life without parole. Gasps filled the room, some with relief, some with disbelief, but all with the knowledge that the case had taken its final legal step. Yet even with the sentence secured, the story continued to haunt those who had lived through it. Families of other missing persons reached out to investigators, begging them to check for possible links to their loved ones. Police hotlines received new tips, some credible, some desperate. Documentaries began production almost immediately, with filmmakers eager to explore the insane twists of a story that seemed stranger than fiction. The victim's family, however, remained focused on healing, trying to build a life around the gaping hole left by their loss. For them, justice was both a comfort and a wound. Comfort, because the guilty would never walk free again. A wound, because no sentence, no matter how severe, could ever bring back the person they loved. In interviews, they spoke softly about memories, about laughter that once filled their homes, about holidays that now felt unbearably empty. Their voices carried a simple but powerful message: no one truly wins in a case like this. The case, now fully closed in court, became a grim lesson for everyone who followed it. It showed how deception can run so deep that even the closest people never suspect a thing. It showed how justice, though powerful, is never enough to erase pain. And it showed how a single crime, hidden at first behind lies and ordinary appearances, can spiral into something so insane and unforgettable that it will be studied for decades. Outside the courtroom, the story of the case refused to die down. Reporters camped outside the courthouse for weeks, capturing reactions, filming interviews, and digging for any small detail that could add to the narrative. Television specials aired late into the night, each one competing to expose another shocking angle. True crime enthusiasts flooded online forums, trading theories and dissecting every word from the trial transcripts. For many, it was not just a crime anymore, it was a puzzle. A haunting story that demanded answers beyond what the courtroom had revealed. The twist that emerged from the encrypted files had changed everything, and people wanted to know the full truth. Law enforcement agencies quietly launched deeper investigations. Detectives cross-referenced the accused's maps and notes with unsolved disappearances from nearby regions. What they found was disturbing. Several of the locations marked on the maps aligned with cold cases that had frustrated investigators for years. Some families who had lost loved ones long ago now found themselves back in the spotlight, reliving their grief with the possibility that answers might finally be closed. For these families, hope and dread existed side by side. The thought that their tragedies might be connected to such a calculated individual brought both relief at the possibility of closure and horror at what those connections implied. Meanwhile, journalists uncovered new details about the accused's past. Digging through old employment records, rental histories, and personal acquaintances, they found strange patterns, frequent moves, sudden changes in jobs, unexplained gaps in timelines. Neighbors recalled odd behavior, the accused wandering late at night, keeping to themselves and avoiding social gatherings. These fragments, dismissed at the time as quirks, now seemed sinister in hindsight. People who once shrugged off these memories now questioned whether they had brushed shoulders with a dangerous predator and simply looked the other way. As investigators followed the trail, one discovery stood out. In a wooded area not far from one of the marked sites, search teams uncovered physical evidence linking the accused to yet another crime. Though decades old, the evidence was preserved well enough to strengthen suspicions. The discovery was grim proof that the accused's twisted web stretched further than anyone had initially believed. Law enforcement released limited information to the public, careful not to ignite panic, but it was clear that the story had evolved from a single shocking case to a far-reaching investigation. For the community at the center of it all, the emotional toll was relentless. Schools held assemblies to comfort students, churches hosted vigils, and support groups formed for anyone struggling with the lingering fear. Parents told their children never to trust strangers, and yet the most painful truth was that the danger had not come from a stranger at all. It had come from someone who blended into daily life, who smiled and nodded like anyone else. That realization carved deep scars of mistrust, scars that would last for generations. The victim's family, though relieved that justice had been delivered in court, found themselves trapped in a cycle of public attention. Every new article, every fresh headline, pulled them back into the nightmare. Strangers approached them in grocery stores, offering condolences but also questions, as though the family could somehow provide answers no one else could. For them, grief was not private. It was displayed for the world to see, analyzed and dissected by people who had never even known their loved one. Yet through it all, they showed resilience. They gave interviews, not to fuel gossip, but to remind the public of the human being at the heart of the story. They wanted people to remember the victim's smile, their kindness, their dreams, not just the horror of their final moments. The accused, now locked away, remained a subject of fascination. Psychologists studied the case, arguing over what drove such behavior. Was it a result of hidden trauma, or simply the nature of a manipulative mind? Documentaries speculated about motives, creating dramatic reenactments that blurred the line between fact and storytelling. Letters poured into the prison from curious strangers, some seeking answers, others disturbingly offering admiration. It was proof of how crime stories, especially those with shocking twists, capture the human imagination in unsettling ways. The broader lesson of the case began to resonate across the country. Police departments used it as training material, warning new officers that the most dangerous criminals are often the ones who appear ordinary. Teachers spoke to students about awareness, about questioning what they take for granted. Families, once casual about their routines, became more protective, double-checking doors and being more cautious about the people they trusted. In a strange way, the crime had reshaped how people thought about safety, trust, and the thin line between normal life and hidden darkness. As time passed, the case settled into history, but it never truly faded. Books were written, documentaries released, and late-night programs retold the story with chilling soundtracks and dramatic narration. Each retelling emphasized the same truth. The twist was not just insane, it was unforgettable. The case became more than a crime. It became a reminder that evil does not always announce itself with shadows and warnings. Sometimes, it sits quietly across the table, smiling, waiting, and planning. Years after the verdict and the revelations that followed, the echoes of the case still refused to fade. What began as a single disappearance had grown into a chilling saga that redefined the way people thought about trust, safety, and the hidden sides of human nature. Documentaries kept the memory alive, podcasts dissected every known detail, and books filled shelves with psychological profiles of the person behind the crime. For some, it was entertainment. For those who lived through it, however, it was an unhealed wound. The town where everything began had changed forever. People still lowered their voices when passing the old neighborhood. Some houses stood empty, their shutters closed, as though the weight of the past had driven residents away. The community carried scars that could not be erased by time alone. The victim's family tried to rebuild, but rebuilding did not mean forgetting. They spoke at schools and events, warning others about the dangers of ignoring small signs. They created a foundation in their loved one's name, dedicated to helping other families facing unexplained disappearances. Their work became a source of hope, turning pain into something meaningful. But even in their speeches, there was a quiet sorrow, a reminder that healing is not the same as moving on. In interviews, they said the hardest part was not the crime itself, but the betrayal. The idea that someone trusted could hide such darkness had shaken their faith in people forever. Law enforcement officers involved in the case admitted that it changed them as well. Detectives who had once trusted their instincts now questioned everything, knowing how easy it was to be deceived. For younger officers, it was a brutal lesson early in their careers: never underestimate the lengths someone will go to hide the truth. The encrypted files, the storage unit, the carefully planned maps. All of it was a reminder that some minds can plan horror with terrifying precision. Training manuals across the country began referencing the case as an example of deception so convincing that even experienced investigators nearly missed it. The accused, locked away with no chance of parole, faded from public view but never from memory. Occasionally, small updates appeared, transfers between facilities, brief appeals rejected by courts. But the story had already been written. Their name became synonymous with betrayal and cruelty, a cautionary tale parents used when warning their children about the hidden dangers of the world. Yet fascination lingered. Some academics still studied their personality, searching for explanations that could make sense of the senseless. But the truth was that no amount of study could fully explain the choices made or the darkness hidden behind a seemingly ordinary life. For the broader world, the insane twist at the heart of the case became its lasting legacy. People were not just shocked by the crime itself, but by the way it unfolded. Layer after layer of lies, until the final truth emerged in a way that no one could have predicted. It reminded everyone that reality often outpaces fiction. Stories like this stay alive because they reflect the uncomfortable truth that danger can be closer than we ever imagined. They warn us that evil does not always come in obvious forms, and that the most terrifying monsters can look like anyone else. Over time, the town tried to reclaim its identity, building new schools, hosting community events, and reminding the world that it was more than the backdrop of a tragedy. Slowly, laughter returned to its streets, though shadows still lingered in the corners. Tourists occasionally visited, drawn by the notoriety of the case, and locals often resented the intrusion. But life continued, as it always does. New generations grew up hearing the story not as lived experience, but as legend, something their parents whispered about late at night. The true crime world never let go of the case, and perhaps that is what secured its place in history. It was not just another crime, it was a story that exposed the fragility of trust, the limits of appearances, and the depth of deception a human being can hide. And the insane twist that shocked everyone ensured that it would be retold again and again. For those who lived through it, the nightmare never fully ended, but for the rest of the world, it became a lesson wrapped in horror, a chilling reminder that the most ordinary lives can sometimes hide the most extraordinary darkness. The story you have just heard is not one that can be easily forgotten. It started as a simple missing person case, the kind of report police receive every day, yet it unraveled into something far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. A family's worst nightmare exposed a hidden world of lies, betrayal, and manipulation that had been brewing right under their noses. The insane twist was not only in the evidence uncovered, but in the shocking realization of who was responsible. The person no one suspected, the one who blended so perfectly into everyday life. That is what makes this case unforgettable. What it teaches us is both powerful and terrifying. Evil does not always appear in the shadows. It does not always announce itself with violence or warning. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it is the friend you trusted, the neighbor you greeted, or the coworker you laughed with. That is the true horror of this story, that darkness can live quietly among us, hiding in plain sight until it finally reveals itself. The victim's family carries scars that no sentence can ever heal, but their strength and determination to turn grief into action stand as a reminder of resilience. They refuse to let their loved one be remembered only for tragedy. Their fight for awareness, for justice, and for helping others is a testament to the human spirit, even in the face of unbearable loss. And that is where we must focus our attention. Not just on the cruelty of the crime, but on the courage of those who survived it. This case will continue to be told in documentaries, articles, and whispered conversations for decades to come. People will always talk about the shocking evidence, the encrypted files, the storage unit, and the chilling maps. They will always remember the twist that made this case unlike any other. But behind all the details and headlines, the truth is simple: a life was lost, trust was shattered, and a community learned that appearances can never be taken at face value. So the next time you think you know someone, or when you find yourself dismissing that uneasy feeling in your gut, remember this story. Remember how easily the mask of normalcy can hide the darkest intentions. Remember that safety is not just about locking doors. It is about awareness, about listening to instincts, and about never assuming that danger only comes from strangers. This was more than a crime. It was a lesson carved in pain, a story with a twist so insane it forces us to question the world around us. And while justice may have closed the courtroom doors, the impact of this case will echo forever in the hearts and minds of those who lived it and those who will never stop telling it.